All right, so when you hear 5G, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Faster downloads on your phone, right? Totally. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. You see, 5G is quietly becoming this massive platform, one that's designed to connect, well, our entire world. And a huge piece of that puzzle just snapped into place with this brand new upgrade. It's a real game changer. So let's dive in and unpack what this is all about. Yeah, that initial promise of 5G, it was all about speed, speed, speed. But the real challenge, the bigger picture, is way broader than that. I mean, can 5G also be cheap enough to stick in a tiny sensor? Can it be efficient enough to power a smartwatch for weeks? And can it possibly have enough reach to work down in a mine shaft or on a cargo ship in the middle of the Pacific? Well, those are exactly the questions that this huge new upgrade, which we call Release 17, was designed to answer. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get a little context on how we got here. Then we'll jump into 3 massive new capabilities. How 5G can connect all those simple little devices, how it can expand its coverage to, well, literally anywhere on Earth, and how it's just getting a whole lot smarter. And then we'll tie it all together and talk about why this actually matters to you. All right, let's do it. So to really get where 5G is heading, we first got to look at how it's even built. And, it's probably not what you'd expect. So, you ever wonder who actually makes 5G? It's not one company, not an Apple or a Samsung. Nope, it's this massive global collaboration run by a group called the 3GPP. And what they do is pretty amazing. They get everyone in a room, the mobile carriers, the phone makers, the researchers, all the big players, and they get them to agree on one single global standard for how all this stuff is going to work. And they build this standard kind of like chapters in a book. They call them releases. So release 15, that was the foundation, the basic plot. Release 16 expanded on that, really pushing into industrial uses. And now we have Release 17, the one we're digging into today. And this chapter is all about refinement. It's about making 5G way more efficient, stretching its reach, and, most importantly, opening the door to a whole new world of connected gadgets. And that right there brings us to the first huge breakthrough in Release 17. This is the solution for connecting the billions of, simple things. The whole Internet of Things. Okay, so here's the fundamental problem they had to solve. Your smartphone and, say, a smart water meter in your basement. They have completely different jobs, right? Sticking a full-blown 5G chip into that little sensor is, well, it's like putting a Formula One engine into a golf cart. It's total overkill. It's super expensive, way too complex, and it would just guzzle that battery in a few hours instead of lasting for years. The network absolutely needed a smarter way. And here it is. The solution is called RedCap. It stands for Reduced Capability, but honestly, just think of it as 5G Lite. It is perfectly designed for all those devices that don't need insane speeds. What they do need is to be cheap, super simple, and to just sip on battery power, for years and years. And you can immediately see how this plays out in the real world. We're talking about things like industrial sensors scattered all over a factory floor that have to last for years on one tiny battery. Or those smart security cameras that just need a super reliable, low-power connection. And get this, it's also for the next generation of wearables. Your smartwatch, fitness trackers, maybe even AR glasses that can finally get smaller and have a battery that lasts. RedCap is just perfectly tailored for all of this stuff. So how do they pull this off? Well, it's pretty clever. They just strip out all the high-performance features that these simple devices just don't need. So it uses less bandwidth, it only needs 1 or 2 antennas instead of the usual 4 or even 8, and it works in what's called half duplex, which basically means it either talks or it listens, but it never does both at the same time. And that alone saves a ton of power and makes it way less complex. It's really all about being perfectly good enough for the job, nothing more. Okay, so problem 1 is solved. We can now connect all the simple things. But what happens when those simple things are in really hard-to-reach places? Well, that is the next huge challenge that Release 17 takes on. So there's always been this trade-off with 5G, right? Those super high-frequency bands that give us wicked fast speeds, they don't travel very far, and they're terrible at going through walls. And that creates a huge coverage problem, especially for the signal coming back from a tiny little device, that sensor in the basement or out in a field. The network just might not be able to hear its tiny little whisper. So the first solution is actually pretty simple, but it's super effective. Just repeat the message. Think about it. If you're in a loud, crowded room and you say something once, it'll probably get lost. But if you shout it over and over again, it's got a much better chance of getting through. That's what Release 17 does. It lets a device repeat its signal up to 32 times. That's a massive increase, and it's enough to punch that signal right through concrete walls or across really long distances. Okay, but what about places where there are no towers at all? In the middle of the desert, out at sea, what then? Well, for that, 5G is looking up, way up. Release 17 officially introduces support for something called non-terrestrial networks, or NTNs. And folks, this is an absolute game changer. We are talking about integrating satellites directly into the 5G network. Yeah, check this out. The idea is that a device, doesn't matter if it's on a container ship, a plane, or being used by a first responder in a disaster zone, it can connect straight to a satellite. And that satellite then beams the signal back down to the main 5G network on the ground. What you get is basically a blanket of connectivity that can cover 100% of the planet. No more dead zones. And just to give you a sense of scale here, a sense of how wild this is, we're talking about geostationary satellites orbiting almost 36,000 kilometers above our heads. I mean, that is just incredible. And this isn't some far-off sci-fi dream anymore. It is now officially written into the 5G standard. The path to true global coverage is here. All right, so 5G can now connect more stuff in more places. What's left? The final, crucial piece of the Release 17 puzzle is making the entire system work smarter, not just harder. Okay, this one is cool. It solves a really quirky but super annoying problem for anyone who uses a dual SIM phone. So imagine your phone has to listen for a call from your work number. We'll call that network Lady Gaga. And your personal number, let's call that one Taylor Swift. What happens if both Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift try to call you at the exact same millisecond? The signals can actually collide, and your phone just gets totally confused. So Release 17 has this genius little trick. The phone can basically ask one of the networks for a new ID, which forces it to reschedule its listening time. It shifts it just enough to prevent that overlap so you never, ever miss a call. And this whole theme of just adding more intelligence, it runs through a bunch of other upgrades too. For battery life, your phone can now chill out on constantly checking the network if your signal is strong. For network slicing, that's where carriers build custom virtual networks. They get way more control. And for private networks, like you'd find in a huge factory, authorized people might soon be able to log in with their regular cell phone credentials. See? It's all about making the network smarter, more flexible, and more efficient. Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground here, right? We've talked RedCap, we've talked NTN, even paging collisions. So let's take a step back and really look at the big picture. Here's the main takeaway, the one thing to remember. Release 17 is the moment 5G truly grows up. It's not just about being a faster network for your phone anymore, not at all. It's becoming a true utility, a flexible, universal platform that is designed to connect literally anything to everything else. So this is the 5G that's on its way. It's a 5G for everything, thanks to the incredible efficiency of RedCap. It's a 5G that's everywhere, from a factory in the city to a ship in the open ocean, all because of non-terrestrial networks. And it's a 5G that's just plain smarter, giving all of us better battery life and paving the way for services we haven't even dreamed of yet. The foundation is now laid. The tools are there. They're in the hands of the innovators, the engineers, the creators. For the first time, the technology itself is no longer the barrier. So I guess the only real question left is, what are we going to build with it?